These are all included in the paper flower kit. These are the petals for the rolled rose, the leafy vine. This is the calyx for the rose, and this is a little bit of oasis bind wire that comes in the kit, and this is what the finished rolled rose is going to look like attached to the vine. And I do sell the SVG to make this, and you can create a garland attaching several of these together, and I'll show you at the end one of those that I have done. What you need to have in addition to what comes in the kit is, of course, glue. And I like to use, for the very inside part of it, you need a tiny bit of glue. So if you have a fine tipped glue, I would use that for just a tiny bit that we need. If not, you can just use whatever glue you have and use a toothpick to apply a tiny bit. For the base of the flower, I need a little heavier glue than my art glitter glue. So I like to use the Beacon 3-in-1, or you could also use a glue gun for attaching the bottom part of it. Next, you will need to have a quilling tool. And if you got the paper flower toolkit, that is included because I do roll this up, or you could use fine tipped tweezers to roll the flower up. And you will need some shaping tools. A wooden skewer works well, or a small knitting needle. And really nice to have, but you don't have to have, is round nose pliers. I find that really helpful for shaping the petals at the end. You also will need a wire cutter. And this multi-tool, it's a tool for jewelry making. It has a little wire cutter in here. It has the round nose pliers, and this square part is good for bending wire to make right angles. And this is a very useful tool to have. I know you can find it on Amazon and in most any craft shop. The first thing I'm going to do is wire the vine. It just is a floppy piece of paper, and in order to use it, it really needs to be stiffened up. So I like to glue Oasis bind wire to the back of it. Oasis bind wire is a very thin gauge wire, I think about maybe 28 gauge, wrapped in paper. And the way that I measure how much to use is I lay it down and basically go from the tip of this leaf following the vine to the tip of this leaf, but I don't glue all the way to the tip. But that's the starting point. And the reason I don't is because you're able to use that wire to attach or hang your vine to whatever you're using it for. For this step, I do use art glitter glue dries clear with the fine metal tip, and there are other fine tipped glues, but you definitely want fine tipped. And if you don't have one, you could use a toothpick to apply glue just to the vine. And I also glue on, this is wax paper or label backing, because if you glue this down and you have paper or table behind you, and as you're pressing it and letting it dry a little bit, it can stick to the surface. So you'll save yourself a lot of trouble if you work on a non-stick surface. So I start I only glue from the middle of the leaf and then across the vine. And you just draw a thin line of glue. I usually go to about the middle. And I put the wire all the way to the end of the leaf, even though there is not glue there. And bind wire is very flexible. So I put it on some of the glue, press it down, hold it for just a couple of seconds, and continue to closely follow the shape of the vine, and it grabs hold very quickly. And then I add glue to the last half of the vine, and only going up to the middle point of that leaf on the end, and pressing down as I go. And your glue might take a little longer than this. The art glitter glue does dry very quickly. You see, it would stick to a different surface, but because of the wax paper, I'm not going to have any trouble with it. Now, if I was doing a much large, because if you use the SVG, this can be scaled up as large as your paper can handle. And if I was going much larger, I would apply a little bit of wire to these side leaves, but this size doesn't need it. So I will set that aside to dry. With the rolled rose petals, the circle, the bigger part in the middle, is the bottom of the flower. And the very end out here is actually the center of the flower. So we're going to start by rolling this up really tightly, and that will end up being the center. So the first thing I do is get either the wooden skewer or the knitting needle, and I curve these just a little bit. About the first 3 or so of the petals, I just go ahead and round and shape them, and that helps me to get a good start. And then I use my quilling tool, and you could use fine tip tweezers to roll this up if you don't have a quilling tool. So you insert the paper into the slot that's at the end of the quilling tool and wrap it up. As soon as the metal is completely covered with paper, I'll get my glue and get a little dot of glue. And we just want a teeny tiny bit, because what that's going to do is hold that center really tight. If you don't put that little dot of glue there, it will kind of open up and it won't look as nice in the middle. And sometimes when I'm making these, I forget to do that, and it's really not a big deal. But I think it looks better if you put that little bit of glue in the center of the flower. And then you roll. You want to keep pretty good tension on the paper, not enough that you tear it, but so that it rolls up fairly tightly. And it's okay if it comes undone a little bit, because we're actually going to let the whole thing go when we get to the end. This is just to help give everything a nice round shape to start with. And then after I get, maybe halfway through, I pop it off and pinch it between my thumb and forefinger and roll it up. And when I do that, I squeeze it as I go, and that also helps to round the petals. And just take it all the way till we get to the end. And then there is a little score line in the center, and that is just to give you a little visual cue of where we're going to place the petals on the bottom. And each of those petals can just fold up. And then I'll let go of the petals. And sometimes they get hung up on each other, so you might need to use your tweezers to kind of free them up, because they do get a little hung up sometimes. More so with the larger ones. With these small ones, it usually don't have a lot of that. And now what I'm going to do is place glue across the base here. And for this, I'm using the Beacon 3-in-1. You could also use hot glue. This grabs it pretty quickly. And I pretty much just run one bead across the base. I don't feel like I need to cover the entire base in glue, because everything goes in a circle. It is all going to get a hold of it. And I like the Beacon because it gives me a little more time than hot glue does to place it where I want it, because you want to pull it so that it, for the most part, covers that whole bottom section where the score line was. And you want to try to center the center. And with the Beacon, I just have to hold it in place for, 10 seconds or so, and it grabs really well. And then I set it aside. Yeah, I think that looks good. Set it aside for a couple of minutes to dry more firmly before I start to shape the petals. But while that's drying, I can shape the leaves of our vine. On the Leafy vine file, there is a score line that goes down each leaf that we want to shape up. Now you could do it by hand, if you have a fingernail, pressing your fingernail in there, or if you have fine-tipped tweezers, or any tweezers, you just lay it across that line and use your finger to fold it up. There's also another tweezer that I like to use. These are cross-lock tweezers, and when you let go, they grab tightly, kind of the opposite of regular tweezers. So I can just place that so that it is right across that score line and fold it up. And I find these are kind of the fastest, easiest tool to work with. So that's what I usually use. And you could put a lot more time into very carefully shaping these and maybe rounding over the edges of your leaves. A lot of that depends on how big a project you're doing. If you have a bunch of these to do, you're probably not going to get that fussy. But if you're just doing one, you might want to put a little more effort into shaping your leaves or even shading your leaves. But this is a very easy way to just add a little shape so that it all looks a little more natural and just looks nicer. We can shape the petals on our flower. I start with the wooden skewer and then I will move to using my round nose pliers. And I start with it backwards just because you can see them better this way. I like to, what I call dog ear the petals. I lay the stick across at an angle this side and an angle this side rather than just rolling it straight back. I just think it looks a little more natural, a little prettier than just rolling the petal straight back. But you can do whatever you want. And you wouldn't even have to shape them like this. You could just roll it up, but I think it looks much better when you take the time to shape the petals a bit. These outer ones are pretty easy to get to, but as we start to get into the center, it's going to get a lot tighter. And that's when I switch to the round nose pliers. And you can take this in as far as you want. I mean, it already starts to look nice. I don't shape all the very innermost ones, but I usually go most of the way in and just leave the tightest center unshaped. You can also go back and kind of pull down some of those outer ones if you want to, but you don't have to. But that is the rolled rose. I think it makes a very pretty little flower. Now we can put our calyx onto the back of it. I just shape the ends of these a little bit by placing a stick on top, have my finger underneath, and it's just kind of a little ribbon curl where you pull it out, applying a little bit of pressure, and it curls up those ends. And I've just put a little bit of glue. I probably let my tip dry out a little bit, and place the flower right on it. And then we can put a little dot of glue there and attach the flower. And there we have our completed rolled rose on the leafy vine. And when you have this little bit of extra here, you can use that to hang it onto something, or you can use that to attach multiples of these together to make a garland.